So here we are. I'm happy to introduce Ms. Cherisa Henderson to give her presentation.
Okay, good morning. My name is Cherisa Henderson, and today I am going to be talking with you about the serving size portion of the nutrition facts label. Serving size is a critical part of the nutrition facts label. The amount of calories and all other nutrients on the label are based on the serving size. If the serving size changes, then all of the other information on the nutrition facts label changes as well. This may be misleading because if consumers think that a serving size represents a whole package, when in fact only represents a portion of the product, it leads consumers to believe they are consuming a certain amount of calories and other nutrients when they are not. It is important to note that there is a difference between serving size on nutrition facts labels and serving size listed in the dietary guidelines for Americans. Serving size listed in the dietary guidelines are for broad categories such as fruits or grains, while serving size for labeling purposes are very specific and vary for each individual product. Serving size is also important to manufacturers. If a manufacturer wants to make a label claim on their product, such as saying that the product is low in fat or high in calcium, the information used to calculate the serving size is used as the basis to determine if the product meets the standard for the claim. Serving size are so important that some major manufacturers have voluntarily updated the serving size on their products in the past few years. A study conducted by FDA showed that many consumers felt that the servings on packages of certain products did not accurately reflect a realistic amount that is eaten, such as sodas that list 2.5 servings in a 20-ounce bottle. Consumers felt that the information on packages were confusing since some of these products were ones that they would assume are to be eaten by one person in one meal or eating occasion, while the label reflected that the products contained 2 or more servings. If the nutrition facts label shows 100 calories per serving and the container says that it contains 2.5 servings, some consumers would think that they were eating 100 calories in the whole package, when they are really eating 250 calories. I want to point out to you that we use the term eating occasion instead of a meal because if you are snacking on a bag of chips while watching TV, it usually isn't considered a meal even though you are still eating. We want to look at how much you eat of a product in one sitting, which may not necessarily be a meal such as lunch or dinner. So we look at eating occasions instead of meals. The official definition of wrong slide. The official definition of a serving size is an amount of food customarily consumed per eating occasion by persons 4 years of age or older, which is expressed in a common household measure that is appropriate to the food. When the food is specially formulated or processed for use by infants or toddlers, a serving or serving size means an amount of food customarily consumed per eating occasion by infants up to 12 months of age or children 1 to 3 years of age. The information we use to determine the serving size for products is called the reference amount customarily consumed, or the RAC. A RAC is the reference number manufacturers use to determine what the serving for each product will be. Serving size on labels vary slightly from product to product. For example, the rack for regular bread is 50 grams. It would be hard for all manufacturers to make their slices of bread exactly 50 grams. One manufacturer's slices of bread may weigh 51 grams, while another manufacturer's slices may weigh 49 grams. The rack is the amount used for reference. It is consistent and never changes, while the serving size is the size of the actual slice of bread that you would see listed on the labels. For this presentation, we will talk primarily about rack and not about label serving size, since this varies for each individual product. FDA established racks for 129 product categories for the general population ages 4 and over, and 11 product categories for infants and toddlers. There are 21 general categories, which include broad categories of products such as bakery, dairy, and snacks. Within each general category, there are more specific product categories which include groups of products such as custards, gelatins, and pudding, which are all grouped together, or fruit juices, nectars, and fruit drinks, which are also all grouped together. We use nationwide food consumption data, such as NHANES, to determine the average amount that a person eats of each type of food in one sitting, meal, or eating occasion, as we call it. Most of the current racks were developed using data created by the USDA in the 1970s and 1980s. The most current version of the racks were developed in 1993. Data from the USDA Nationwide Food Consumption Survey was used to develop the racks. As I previously said, this data looked at the amount of food usually consumed by one person in one eating occasion. When determining what numbers make up the rack, FDA paid most attention to the mean, which is the average amount consumed. They also paid attention to the size of the sample. If not enough people reported eating a certain product, then data from that category was not included. Although the most emphasis was placed on consumption data when determining the rack of a product, FDA also considered other factors. Most of these factors were used when there was little or no data available for a particular product. They are serving size recommended by dietary guidance documents such as the dietary guidelines, serving size recommended by the general public through comments received by FDA, serving size used by other countries, and serving size used by manufacturers and grocers. Foods that are similar are grouped together and have the same rack so that customers can make easy comparisons when looking at the labels. For example, fruit juice and soda are both beverage products which are used in the same way. By having the same rack, a consumer could look at the label of a bottle of soda and a bottle of juice and determine which product they would like to buy. If the labels were based on different racks, then it would be harder for them to make an easy comparison of the two products. Racks are provided primarily in metric units and are expressed in grams. However, the law requires the serving size also be expressed in common household measures that are appropriate to the particular food. These are the types of household measures you will see on food labels. A single serving container is used for products that are packaged and sold individually and are to be eaten by one person in a single meal or eating occasion. For example, small bags of chips and pretzels that you find at convenience stores or fruit cups and yogurt cups that you normally find in children's lunch boxes are all considered to be single-serving products that can reasonably be consumed in one eating occasion. FDA considers a product to be a single serving if it contains less than 200% of the rack. Larger products that weigh 100 grams or 100 milliliters or larger have the option of declaring their product as 1 or 2 servings if the product contains more than 150% but less than 200% of the rack. Manufacturers have the option to label their products as a single serving if it is over the requirement, if the manufacturers feel the product can reasonably be consumed by one person at a single eating occasion or meal. This chart gives a better idea of when a manufacturer would consider a product to be a single serving. As you can see, manufacturers always have the option of labeling a product as a single serving if they feel that the product can reasonably be consumed by one eating occasion. However, manufacturers do not have the option of labeling packages that are small as more than one serving. The reason why this is important is that we want the information on the label to reflect what is inside the package as accurately as possible. If you have a small snack-sized product listing calorie information as 2 servings when it's really 1, then the consumer may pick it up and think that it's a healthier option when in reality it has the same amount of calories as the competitor's product. Here's an example of 2 different labels for 20-ounce bottles of soda. The label on the left shows the serving size as 8 fluid ounces, 2.5 servings per container, while the label on the right shows the serving size as 1 bottle or 20 fluid ounces. Notice the difference in calories when the entire container is labeled as 1 serving. The amount of calories is more than double. As I was saying earlier, in a study conducted by FDA, we found that many consumers consider this type of labeling to be confusing and misleading, since most people consider a 20-ounce bottle of soda to be for one person. If you are quickly glancing at the first label and not looking at the serving size in detail, you would think that the calorie amount was for the whole bottle and not for a portion of the bottle. Here's another example. These are labels for two different size muffins. The label on the left shows a large muffin that uses 1/2 muffin as a serving size, while the label on the right shows a medium-sized muffin that uses 1 whole muffin as a serving size. If you look at the gram weight for muffins, you see that they are 57 and 54 grams respectively, which means that the serving is about the same. The calorie and nutrient information for the two labels is also very similar. What is confusing is that one label is for 1/2 muffin, while the other is for 1 whole muffin. So if a consumer missed the serving size not being for the whole muffin on the first label and ate the whole larger muffin, then they would think they are consuming half of the calories than they really are. The reason why you're seeing such a variance in the label is that package size have increased for certain types of products over the last 20 years, and our current racks are developed using consumption data from the 1970s and 1980s. This is an example of a product that we now see larger packages on the market than those that were made in the past. However, consumers still consider the larger package to be a single serving. Here's an example of how to determine if a product is a single serving container. You have a brownie product that you want to determine the serving size for. First, you would look in the Code of Federal Regulations, also known as the CFR, and find the rack for brownies. This picture is not 100% clear, but if you were looking up brownies in the regulations, this is what it would look like, and brownies is circled. According to the table, the rack for brownies is 40 grams. If your product weighs 80 grams or more, it is over 200% of the rack and does not have to be labeled as a single serving. If your product weighs less than 80 grams, then your product must be labeled as a single serving. If we had a brownie that weighed 100 grams, then this product would be over 200% of the rack. Manufacturers have the option of labeling the brownie as one serving if they feel that it can be consumed in one eating occasion, or as a fraction of the brownie. Since 1/3 of 100 grams, or 33 grams, is the closest allowable fraction to 40 grams, to the 40 gram rack, then the brownie can be labeled as either 1/3 brownie or a whole brownie. Here's another example of how to determine if a product is a single serving container. In this example, we are determining the rack of a soda product. The first step is to go back to the table in the CFR to find the rack for carbonated beverage. Again, if we're looking up soda regulations, this is what it would look like. According to the table, the rack for carbonated beverages is 240 milliliters. This product is considered a large rack product because the rack is over 100 milliliters, because the product is over 100 milliliters. If the carbonated beverage is 360 milliliters or less, then your product must be labeled as a single serving because it is less than 150% of the rack. If the carbonated beverage is 360 milliliters, which is over 150% of the rack, but less than 480 milliliters, which is 200% of the rack, then your product can be labeled as 1 or 2 servings. If your product is over 480 milliliters, it can be labeled as a single serving if it can be reasonably consumed by one person in one eating occasion. With this information in mind, a can weighing 12 ounces must be labeled as a serving size, as a single serving. A bottle weighing 16 ounces may be labeled as having 1 serving or 2. A 20-ounce bottle may be labeled as having 1 serving or as having more than 1 serving if the manufacturer feels that it can be reasonably consumed in one eating occasion. This is where you see 2.5 servings on a bottle of soda. A 20-ounce bottle is 591 milliliters. Since the rack is 240 milliliters, 2.5 times 240 equals 600, which when rounded is equal to, which would be 591 milliliters when rounded. In 2005, we issued an Advanced Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, or ANPRM, on serving size and racks. In this ANPRM, we asked questions to the general public about the current serving size for products. The questions were about three main areas, which were whether to require food packages that can reasonably be consumed in one eating occasion to declare the whole package as a single serving, which, if any, racks of food categories needed to be updated, and whether to provide for comparative calorie claims for smaller portions of identical foods. There were three main issues that FDA was considering when issuing the ANPRM. These issues were increased consumption and increased package size in some food categories, requirement versus option to list nutrition information for the entire package, which means should we require products that can reasonably be consumed by one person on one eating occasion to do so? And lastly, should we require additional columns of nutrition information or one column of nutrition information for the entire package? There is some concern that while some larger products, like a large muffin, can be consumed by one person on one eating occasion, a lot of people would not consume that much at one time. FDA was considering if they should allow for two columns of information to be listed on these types of labels. One column with information based off of the current serving size and one column based off of information for the entire package. FDA has analyzed recent food consumption data from NHANES 2003 to 2008 to determine whether consumption amounts have changed for several food categories. FDA is considering updating the 1993 racks if there is an increase or decrease in consumption when comparing the current racks to the 2003-2008 NHANES data. There are two things to consider when determining if we should update the racks. The first is if consumers will think that large serving sizes mean that they should eat more. Studies show that many consumers think the serving size is a suggested amount of a product to eat rather than an average amount that is based on what we are already eating. If we increase serving size, will these consumers think that we are trying to say that it's okay for them to eat more? The second issue is whether consumer comments are enough to update certain product categories. In response to the 2005 ANPRM, we received many comments from consumers saying that the serving size on certain foods are unrealistic and misleading. FDA needs to consider if consumption data justifies a change for these products. And in the graphic, I don't know if you could see it all the way, at the bottom it says, we decided to split the Caesar salad. Things to consider when determining if we should update the definition of a single serving container is whether we should maintain the 200% cutoff value in the current definition or change it to a higher amount. If we decide to change the value, will this apply to all foods or foods we have identified as having products that are over 200% of the rack but can reasonably be consumed in one eating occasion, or possibly to foods that have large racks? Currently, manufacturers have the option of labeling a product that is over 200% of the rack as a single serving container if the contents could possibly be consumed in one meal or eating occasion. Requiring a dual column label would serve to make labeling accurate and helpful for both consumers who do eat the products at one time and consumers that will only eat a portion of the product at one time. Again, dual column labels have one column showing the serving based on the rack and one column showing the serving based on the entire package. Issues to consider with dual column labeling are if dual column labeling should be made mandatory instead of optional. If made mandatory, where do we apply the new cutoff limits for dual column labeling? And lastly, What foods to require to meet the new requirements for dual labeling foods? Should it be foods commenters have written to us to be problem foods or all foods? This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. I see some questions are posted.
Okay, so we have quite a few questions posted. There were several questions, and the screen, which is very small, scrolled down, so I want to try to get back to the very first question that was asked so that we can answer the questions in the order that they were received. Because some people will say, you know, I don't want you to think that we're just taking them at random. We're going to try to go back to the very first question. Give us 1 second. I think we are almost there. And the first question is, are manufacturers required to use the rack amounts, or are they just used as guidelines?
Manufacturers are required to use the racks. When we published the first rule in 1993, that was the first time that we required all manufacturers to have the same standards for serving size on their labels.
Okay, and thank you. And then the second question is, can manufacturers manipulate their serving sizes so that their produce meets certain claims, like low sodium?
Yes. I think that what you're seeing, like in the muffin example, is that manufacturers have made their products bigger so that now what was considered one muffin may be 1/2 muffin. But we don't see that as often. They always can manipulate the size of their products. But again, when we're looking at the reference amount, this says that all manufacturers' products have to fit this reference amount. So actually, claims themselves are based off of the reference amount. So if they make their product really big and the reference amount stays the same, they must base the claim off of what the reference is versus what the actual product is.
Okay, we have time for just one last question, and it will be, what is the expected time frame? That's not the last question? Excuse me. All right, please verify, how does the 600 milliliter soda can have one serving, which is 600% of the 100 milliliter rack? Just something, I can't read that word, one person can, I think. Just the amount that one person can reasonably drink in one sitting.
I'm assuming with that question we're talking about cans that are over 240 milliliters. As I said in the beginning of the presentation, some manufacturers have voluntarily decided to change the labels of their products. Our serving size data is based on data from 1970s and 1980s, and recent NHANES data has showed that labels have that consumption, has increased. So a 20-ounce bottle of soda, which is now considered normal, would not have been considered normal at that time. So if we're saying that someone could reasonably consume this product, then they can come to us and ask if it's okay for them to put a bigger label on it.
All right, thank you. We're going to move to our next presentation.